Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethay, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, then the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses, develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Yeah, well, grand rising to you, my audience here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. You know, if you join us on a regular basis, I'm your host, Ronald Bethay, and today's date is July 23rd, 2025, and we're all blessed just to be alive. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest today, but we have a very exciting show. But before we jump right into our show, we want to talk, sort of set the stage for today's show. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been beating around the drum and talking about those entities that bring you this show every week. Well, this show is brought to you by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSLF HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative. And you can get more information about that initiative by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. That's positivechangepc.com. You can click on our news and events tab, and you can go through our blog and our listing of articles which we feel are very outstanding, and we have some of the greatest of what we find as online information resources in the country as it relates to renewable energy and the challenges facing renewable energy after the passing of HR 1, which I refer to as the big, brutal steel bill, which was just budget, which was just passed, which is the highest transfer of wealth in the history of this country from the working class arena to the billionaires and of this country. And it's all based on smoke and mirrors. Let me be very clear, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about how the game is played strategically today on this program. We're going to look at the organizations that, in fact, control how the game is played through the regulatory entities such as the PJM. Now, if you're not familiar with the regulatory entities that regulate the wholesale prices of energy in this country, then we are duty bound to explain who they are and what they do and how they do it. Now, the PJM has a annual capacity auction, which was held every year in July, and it was held on yesterday evening, the 22nd of July. The annual power capacity auction, which services 65 million customers, serving 13 states and the District of Columbia. Now, we're going to give you a little breakdown on Well, just who is the PJM? It's the largest regional transmission organization in the United States, responsible for operating electricity grids for once again 65 million Americans across the mid-Atlantic states and DC. It oversees how power moves from generation to homes and businesses, and it runs elect energy auctions that help set electricity prices years in advance. That's very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. Hashtag for this show is if there's power in numbers, then Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The other hashtag is everything starts with energy, everything ends with energy. And that is why we want to make it sure that we want to let people know what you're seeing in the mainstream media around. I refer to him as COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts coming straight at you. You know him as your president, Donald Trump, and the uh, implications of the case that just won't go away by the gentleman who was a known pedophile that was supposed to have died in custody while he was in jail. But we know that from a standpoint of what's really going on in this country is that before the 2024 elections, Donald Trump called a meeting with the fossil fuel industry and indicated to them, if you put $1 billion up for my election campaign for 2024, you can do whatever you want to do. Now, we're going to take a deep dive into that, and we're going to talk about those entities in which those fossil fuel companies have and the grip that they have on these regulatory entities. Now, once we begin to start talking about the PJM, we need to go back and look at the dramatic increase in costs affiliated with the decisions that's been made since 2023 and how they have impacted you as a customer and resident in one of the 13 states in the District of Columbia. Now, in 2023, the last year's capacity, year before last year's capacity marked a dramatic increase. 2024 marked a dramatic increase of cost, prices surging from in 2023, the wholesale cost was $28.92, and it jumped from 2023 to 2024 to $269.92 per megawatt day for millions of consumers. That was intended as a so-called safeguard for reliable power because a significant financial burden. Let's talk about what is really going on. The PJM calculates how much electricity capacity will be needed during the future high demand days and adds an additional reserve margin. Power providers bid on the offer that of that capacity. PJM accepts the lowest bid until it meets its target. The final accepted bid sets the clearing price, which all winning bidders are paid regardless of their original offers. These capacity payments are paid directly by consumers through the utility bills, whether the capacity is actually needed or not. Let me repeat that, ladies and gentlemen. The PJM accepts the lowest bids first until it meets its target goal. The final accepted bid sets the clearing price, with all winning bids are paid regardless of their original offer. This capacity payments are paid directly by the consumers through their utility bills, whether the capacity is actually needed or not. Now, there's been a great deal of discussion and litigation that's gone back and forth around, well, what's driving this surge in costs? Now, when we begin to look at what was expected to happen, the bottom line is what? As the PJM prepares to release its capacity auction results, which were released on last night, the stakes couldn't be higher for consumers. Years of delay and price gouging have left grid over reliance on expensive, unreliable fossil fuels, all while thousands of cheaper, more resilient, clean energy projects languish in the backlog because they have a skew and they have over 3,000 renewable energy projects that has not been cleared from PJM's queue. Yes, I said less than 95% of the 3,000 projects that's been sitting in the PJM's queue for the last 3 years have been cleared to come online. Rather than challenging the profit margins of its utility members or allow fair competition from clean energy, PJM continues to prop up the status quo, delivering higher bills and fewer options for families and businesses across the region to protect consumers from and lower costs. PJM breaks the cycle by lowering costs and clean energy onto the grid at the speed of the scale of monumental demands. Another year of delay is not an option. This is just a statement that was made, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to look at what actually happened on last night. PJM capacity auction delivers high-powered prices for consumers yet again. Now remember, in 2023, the wholesale price for a kilowatt day was actually $28, and it jumped from $28 and some odd cents to $269 per kilowatt day from 23 to 24. Last night for the auctions in 2025, it actually went up again. So, with that being said, like I said, in 2023, it was $28.92, which was the wholesale price, auction price for 2023. In 2024, it jumped to $269.92 per megawatt day. So people might be asking, well, what is causing this great jump in costs? Can we say the natural gas turbine, which are used to power data centers and the proliferation of data centers for the purpose of artificial intelligence, crypto mining, and blockchain technology? This is the driving force behind this industry, ladies and gentlemen. And the fossil fuel industry has been awarded by the Trump administration with new blockchain legislation to, in fact, increase the demand for energy. There was a recent summit held in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, with a all of the vested corporations and interests who are building 8,000 data centers worldwide. Here in the United States, you know who your major players are. Microsoft and your major tech companies are the driving force behind this demand, with individuals such as Elon Musk. There's also, you can find on under our news and events, an article in our May our blog entitled Memphis, how the community has basically pushed back against another data center being built there, because Elon Musk built a data center about 6 years ago. And at that data center, because he had sort of played what we call some folks call it the lobbying game. I call it pay to play. But he went in and he, in fact, took care of the local politicians there in Memphis. And in the permitting process, they indicated they would have 15 gas turbines to power that data center. They had 35, and the carcinogens and the different poisons, lead, and other elements which have gone into the atmosphere has increased the rate of asthma, as well as the rate of people coming down with various lung and health issues, as well as the devaluation of property values because of the air quality there in Memphis. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that can be found under our news and events tab. So that sort of gives you an idea what's going on. But this is a nationwide issue. Now, what we need to look at what took place at the PJM capacity auctions for 2025. PJM capacity auctions delivered a record high power prices for consumers yet again. Now, there was supposed to be a cap set in an agreement with Governor Shapiro, who had filed a lawsuit, which had been joined by Governor Westmore, the governor from New Jersey, and other governors concerning this. Now, last night, which was the 22nd of July, PJM Interconnections released the results of its annual capacity auction, breaking yet another record for the highest electricity prices from consumers across the Mid-Atlantic, a clearing price of $329.17 a megawatt day, a 22% increase above last year's record of $269.92 which was $28 and some odd cents in 2023. And you had this great demand. Now, the PJM has dragged its feet on installing new solar and wind projects, which is the fastest and cheapest energy to build a cheaper even without the federal tax credits. For years, the PJM has paused approval for more of its new projects, leaving more than 3,000 clean energy and storage proposals, 95% of PJM's wait list stuck in a broken stew. On average, projects are waiting more than 5 years just to get approval, for the longest delay in the grid of all grid operators in the US. Now, let's look at this. As I've indicated, the PJM has the 13 states, starting with North Carolina, Virginia, I think it's Kentucky, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Illinois, in its territorial mark. So, who composes the PJM? The PJM is composed by the stakeholders, which are the utility companies and the installation companies, which would be your Pepcos, B&Gs. They are all players in the PJM, and they all get a vote. There's over 1,000 members from the gas and oil. There's 1,000 members, and the lion's share of those members are from the fossil fuel industry. Let me put it that way. Now you have the CASO, which takes in California, which is a regulatory entity, which has 2 states with 16 megawatts, the Mid-Continent Independent System with 15 states, which is MISO. Then you have the Southwest Power Pool, SPP, which has 14 states. New York system is known as the regulatory entity. Is supposed to have an independent system, but they're also a part of the PJM region. Then you have the Electro Reliability Council of Texas, which covers the state of Texas. And then there is that gives you a breakdown of the different regulatory entities that control, and they do the same thing as the PJM. But PJM has the worst of all of these other regulatory entities of bringing on renewable energy projects. Now, as a result, a supply shortfall has driven up the auction prices and spiked electricity bills up by 30% in just this month. But instead of fixing the backlog, the PJM is sidelining clean alternatives and prioritizing gas plants that are more expensive, slower to add to the grid because of the longer construction timelines and back orders for gas turbines, and increasing unreliable term for extreme weather. According to modeling from the SNIPE energy economics, reforming the PJM broken approval process would deliver major tangible benefits across the Mid-Atlantic, including $550, $505 in the average household energy savings each year, 313,000 additional jobs would be created each year across the PJM region, a 23% lower electricity costs for industry and commercial consumers. This is what's on the line, ladies and gentlemen, while the House and the Senate focuses on shutting down Congress after H.R. 1 was passed, which in fact gutted the investment tax credits for the renewable energy industry. And we're going to take a deep dive into that later on into this show today. We're going to break this down. We're going to look at some very reliable data sources and give you the real information that people need to be paying attention to. Because as I've been saying, it's all about understanding everything starts with energy and everything ends with energy. Now, as I have indicated, what has already taken place with this tremendous jump from 2023, a jump from $28.69 per kilowatt day. Yeah, $28.92 per kilowatt day in 2023, which was the wholesale price for 2023, to $269.92 per megawatt day, not kilowatt day, but per megawatt day in 2024. A tremendous jump. And last night, it jumped from the $269.92 to $329.17 per megawatt day, which was another 22% increase over the tremendous 200% increase in 2024. This is pure madness. And for us not to be talking about this being the lead main topic in the mainstream media. No, that's not going to get the attention. Let's sort of look at various organizations have understand and talked about this. This is a response from Mrs. Julia Courtry, who is the Evergreen Action Deputy State Policy Director. This is not the kind of record you want to break. Yet again, PJM's capacity auction delivered a high price for working families and business simply can't afford, despite repeated warning from governors, advocates, and industry. Now, when we get to talking about this, bipartisan governors demand into PJM's delay in mismanagement. This was published on the 17th of July, 2025. A bipartisan group of 9 governors sent a letter to PJM board. Let's look at who those governors were. In this particular letter that was sent to the PJM. And I'm trying to make some adjustments here to Governor Myers from the state of Illinois, Governor Andy Brashear from Kentucky, Governor Charles Wilmer from Michigan, Governor Joseph Shapiro, Pennsylvania, Governor Glenn Duncan, Virginia, Governor of Illinois, Wes Moore, Governor of Maryland, Governor Murphy from New Jersey, and the Governor of Tennessee. These are the governors who have signed on to in fact be responsible caretakers to make sure that this didn't happen to their constituents. And as I've indicated, this particular letter went on to say a bipartisan group of 9 governors sent a letter, and I've named those governors, to the PJM Board of Managers, raising concerns over grid operators' leadership and direction. The governors cited persistent delays in connecting new energy resources, inadequate long-term transmission planning, and stakeholders' mismanagement that have eroded trust among states and consumers. In response, this statement was put out by the policy director, Julia Courtley, from Evergreen Action. This makes one thing clear. The era of business as usual at PJM is over. For too long, PJM has protected utility and generator profits at the expense of the very people it's meant to serve. And now leaders on both sides of the aisle are demanding a course of correction. Now, you can applaud and do all the applauding you want to do with this. That's a good thing. I'm looking at what we are dealing with as it relates to what actually happened. 2023, the wholesale price jumped from $28.92 to $269. And then from last night's auction, it jumped another 22% to $329.17 a megawatt day. Now, as we would look at what we are saying, ladies and gentlemen, why isn't this focused in on cause and effect, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed by President Biden, Executive Order 140096, which created the Build Back Better and Invest in America and Invest in America platform as we know it today. Now, there are numerous other issues that we can sort of sink our teeth in, but we want to go right to the sources of looking at what actually has taken place and what has led to the PJM feeling so bold that they can do what they are doing and get away with it. And I'm going to give you an example. Now, Governor Shapiro in December of 2023 filed a lawsuit which was joined by the governor Wes Moore of Maryland and the governor of New Jersey. They filed that lawsuit with the Federal Regulatory Commission here in Washington, D.C. They were successful in stopping an 800% rate hike for natural gas. Once again, the driving force behind the fossil fuel industry demand for natural gas, the construction delays for the gas turbines, which has been proven to be an unreliable source, yet Trump administration just went on record. They went to Pennsylvania while the government, energy techs, and banking leaders held the summit. Protesters warned of worsening climate pollution, a future shaped by the worst people for the worst for people on Earth. Trump hails $90 billion corporate investment to make Pennsylvania an AI hub fueled by natural gas. Is the headline. This was written by Marlene Lavelle and a Kelly Bentz, which was published on the July 15th in Inside Climate News, which is a very, very resourceful inside online publication that we get quite a bit of information from and provide that information to our visitors to our website. Pittsburgh, flanked by the titans of the fossil fuel, tech, and finance industries, these are the ones who are, in fact, driving the AI, crypto mining, and blockchain industry. On Tuesday, held $90 billion in private investment aimed at building a massive artificial intelligence hub around Pennsylvania's natural gas resources. This is a really triumphant day for people of the Commonwealth of the United States of America. Trump said, today's commitments are ensuring the future that will be designed and built right here in Pennsylvania, right here in Pittsburgh. And I have to say, the United States of America, touted by Trump as the largest private investment in the state's history. The plan would solidify the market for an abundance of natural gas resources that have made Pennsylvania the nation's #2 producer, second only to Texas. It also would support a major expansion of fossil fuel production in defiance of the science showing that the world needs to drive down greenhouse emissions to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. while corporate chieftains and the politicians gather at the Carnegie Mellon University at what was billed as an inaugural Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit. Protesters, protesters that were opposing this event as CMU's decision to host it took place down on the street. Hundreds of professors, college students, Pittsburgh residents, activists, marches Forbes Avenue towards the campus where they were stopped by a police line in riot gear. The people of Pittsburgh are desperate about climate change. Tracy Batten, director of the Individual Pittsburgh and co-organizer of the protests. We're not going back to this unchecked industrialized pollution that has plagued Pittsburgh for so many years, she said. A lot of us are outraged that Trump thinks he can visit our campus when he is disrupting the research grants and terrorizing our students at Carnegie, McDowell, and chemistry professors. A CMU professor who wore a lab coat to the protest. McDonald studies how environmental pollution affects Arctic, the ecosystems, and human health, she said. And many other faculty members have lost funding from Trump's administration, made a dramatic cuts to federal research grants across the country. As far as I can tell, the energy and innovation policies that were taking place about is building more data centers in Western Pennsylvania, fracking more fuel, she said, which isn't the choice that we need to be making. Now, you'll be able to find this complete article, ladies and gentlemen, on our website, and it's quite extensive. But we want to look at some other things that's being done by Congress and the fossil fuel industry and their lobbyists as they are pushing to gut the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, the clean energy pipeline grows to 328 billion with 184 gigawatts primed to be deployed. This was an article that I loaded on yesterday, but it's dated May 29th, 2023. This is what has been taking place. Another article, which was I just recently posted, is dated Tracking Clean Energy Projects, Expanding the Production Announced Across America. Now, once you go into this particular article, ladies and gentlemen, it will give you a breakdown of the total number of projects which the e2website.org, the Clean Energy Projects, Expansions, and Productions Across America, which is an organization that since Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act on August 16th, 2022, $132 billion in private investment for clean energy manufacturing spurred programs that was growing in Republican districts. We're talking about $132 billion that were targeted to GOP districts and investments. We're talking about $397 new projects. We're talking about looking at this by the congressional districts. Republicans had 245 projects with private investment of $109,087,600,000, creating 88,867 jobs. Many of these are gone. In the Democratic congressional districts, 129 projects, investment $20,378,000,000, 30,133 jobs, many of which are gone. In the what they call defined districts, which are 23 projects, 3,278,500,000, there were 4,134 jobs. Many are gone. Now, what we need to look at, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be able to find that breakdown, which breaks down each state, and you'll be able to find that your largest number of projects went into red states. Michigan, I think, was the leading blue state with 34 projects. North Carolina had 29 projects. South Carolina had 32 projects. Tennessee had 25 projects. Texas had 32 projects. They were the leading projects, states with projects, and you can look, and Georgia with 33. So we're just going to give you a breakdown on those states because there are a total of 43 states in this listing. Georgia, as we've indicated, 33 projects, 12,881,000, a total of 15,998 jobs, which many of them may be gone. Michigan, 34 projects, 12,514,800,000, 12,000, that's private investment dollars, 12,149 jobs, which many could be gone. And we're putting it at that because we have to verify that before we put that out over the airways. South Carolina, my home state that I hail from, 32 projects, $14,492,500,000 in investment, 14,183 jobs. Many could be gone. Now, I know without a doubt for these red states, this is the largest amount of private investment dollars that have ever come into these states and created these type of job opportunities for their residents. But the GOP voted it down in H.R. 1. Tennessee, 25 projects, 5,603,800,000, 5,600 jobs. Many could be gone. Texas, 32 projects, 9,311,000,000, 14,102 jobs. Many could be gone. Now, you can go to our news and events tab and you'll be able to find which sectors. It breaks it down in terms of projects by sector. Battery storage, 64 projects, 42,151,100,000 in investment, 26,637 jobs. Many are gone. Biofuels, energy efficiency, investments, 6 billion 200 jobs, EV projects. This is what's very disturbing, and this is what sent the so-called madman Elon Musk, who was supposed to be the so-called genius who Trump bought into his administration to be the hatchet man. 151 projects, 82 billion, $875,800,000 in private investment, 64,513 jobs. Many of these opportunities are gone. You'll be able to find grid transmission, 38 projects, 4,367,569,000 private investment. Now, Trump recently signed an executive order that talked about wind and solar are not reliable sources. And he talked about the fact that this was money that, in fact, was foreign investment. So what we wanted to look at was what were the key takeaways. And you're talking about the clean energy pipeline of 328 billion with 184 gigawatts, which this happened in 2023, ladies and gentlemen. And solar from 2023 to 2024 added 60% of all new energy capacity to the grid. It was a 33% increase from 2023 to 2024. Now, Trump puts out a document with an executive order to kill the industry and talked about foreign investment. And you're talking about, let's look at the ability of how this actually impacts what we're talking about. Now, a report which was put out by the American Clean Power Association basically will give you a breakdown, and this goes back to December 19th of 2024, and you'll be able to find massive impacts of the 3.8 trillion in net spending across the U.S. economy. And renewable energy was given a 4-to-1 return through the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's what they were looking at. And that's what they were talking about in this particular article. 4-to-1 return from the Inflation Reduction Act. And this was all undercut and undergirded by the passing of H.R. 1, which I refer to as the big, brutal steal, which was just passed, which in fact takes away the investment tax credits and incentives for the industry. Now, we talked about looking at home And the Maryland Clean Energy Center put out takeaways as the impact of this bill. Renewable energy, one good thing, the renewable energy sharing established a counties that would receive 25% of the revenue from wind and solar production on federal lands, mirroring oil and gas revenue sharing. Now, the bad things are increased energy costs. This bill is projected to increase Americans' energy costs, raising electricity prices 7 to 10%. Ratepayers' bill from $110 to $400 a year on the average household and business across Maryland. Job losses and investment. The bill establishes and eliminates 900,000 energy and manufacturing jobs and threatens over $500 billion in investment in the U.S. economy. Now, I'm going to be reaching out to some folks from the Maryland Clean Energy Center, and we're going to have them on in the very, very near future to talk about that aspect of that number as we begin to look at the how this is going to impact the renewable energy industry. And I've been trying to basically focus on getting to an article which gives you a breakdown of those entities and who they are and what countries that they come from, and how many of these are based on the information that was put out about this being a foreign investment and entities that are investing in America. But if they're investing in America and they're creating job opportunities in America, QCell, which is a South Korean solar manufacturing, invested $3 billion in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. I don't think nobody was complaining about that. The fact of the matter is, it's the largest solar manufacturing facility in the North American hemisphere. It's located in Dalton, Georgia. Now, we know who they are, who the players are. We know this is the fossil fuel industry that's driving this whole thing. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we have been looking at how do we look at working around these type of issues, and how do we direct this to the offices of the people's councils at our public service commissions and get some response to the public to educate the masses of people of what is actually going on around these industries. And it's more than a struggle when you begin to talk about different studies that's been put out. The clean energy tax credits have had a significant increase on domestic energy production, reinvalidating communities across the country and lowering consumer energy bills by supporting our nation's diverse array of energy resources. The Inflation Reduction Act is strengthening our national security and enhancing economic competitiveness, said the ACP Chief Executive Officer Janet Garment. With energy demand skyrocketing, the American energy industry must rise together to provide electricity that is affordable, reliable, and clean. Simply put, consistent federal policy is essential to the power. Well, all that just went out the window with HR1. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the close of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I hope that we brought you news that you could definitely use here on the platform today on our show. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, before we close, we didn't take a lot of time and breaks in this thing because we wanted to try to get as much information out to our listening audience as we possibly could on this particular show. But this show is brought to you every week, ladies and gentlemen, by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, which serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, this show is also brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar, which yours truly serves as the chair of the board of directors for the National Association of Blacks in Solar, which we are a 501c3 organization, which are basically our mission statement is set up to address and bring more African and African American students and individuals into the renewable sector to get our people educated around what the issues are, how to make their businesses to grow those businesses, to in fact be able to capitalize those businesses, and to look at how we can work domestically with securing more opportunities here in the U.S. with those foreign entities that are investing and that were investing, such as Toyota, which was going to pump $30 billion in a battery manufacturing facility in a small area called Liberty, North Carolina, small town called Liberty, North Carolina, which is ran by an African American mayor. There is so many more opportunities that lie on the continent that we need to begin to address with the president of Gabon, with Liberia, and other presidents of African nations. There were 5 of them at a mini African Senate summit that was held here in Washington, D.C. recently at the White House. And the president asked Trump if he could assist him with getting a company to help him build power plants for manufacturing up to 8 to 10 gigawatts of energy so that they can increase manufacturing of mineral resources that they have in their mineral rich land, which many of us are quite aware that the lithium and cobalt and many other valuable minerals, uranium, are all located inside of the African continent. And they have those resources with gold and other resources that they need there, but they don't have the power that they need for manufacturing. And the president of Gabon was here. Well, I am working with entities, and we are going to be trying to make sure that we can put together a collaboration to respond to that RFP and the need there in Gabon. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us for another exciting edition here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, I'm not going off the air without letting you know that you need to go to our website at positivechangepc.com and you need to make a donation to support this platform, because the online digital podcast radio TV network that we are putting together, if we're bringing you news that you definitely can use, then you need to support the platform and the news and what we bring to the table every week. And in order to grow this, to increase this, it costs money. So we're making it real plain. We're not the greedy, we're simply the needy here. So any contributions that you can make, you can go directly to our website and you can click on our donate button, and please make that donation, because nothing's too small. With that being said, we're going to be working around other campaigns of how we can raise funding for this platform. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here for another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And remember, I'm your host, Ronald Bethay, and we don't want you to meet us here. We want you to beat us here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And until next week,